Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here in Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. And in our next segments, we're going to hear from Chrystia Freeland and Sean Fraser, Jenna Sudds, and Rechie Valdez. They're going to be talking about carbon taxes, housing, social development, small business, and what the liberal government is working on in respects. Hey, how are they helping all these areas? We have been hearing a lot from Pauvier about especially housing and the housing prices and what they look like. And I know that in the area that our offices sit in, that we're seeing more homeless. And it's not like we're in a rundown part of the area in British Columbia. We're actually in kind of a more upscale area. And we're seeing this because they're seeing more people lining up for food banks. And the reason is because things are becoming so expensive. We're also going to hear statements about what the Liberals are planning to do for farmers, because they're saying that they shouldn't have to pay extreme amounts of carbon tax. They're feeding the country. Why should they be penalized for running their equipment when that equipment is putting food where we can go purchase it? Which leads to, when we look at how the carbon tax is actually aimed and how it affects the marketplace, that the end user is the one being penalized by the carbon tax, not necessarily the polluter. Large polluters are allowed to pass on that tax in the expensive goods. They're allowed to cost it straight in. And they shouldn't be allowed to do that. They should be made to eat the tax, to pay the tax to the government without passing any of those costs on to us, the consumer. There's something seriously wrong in these programs, that the people are being taxed and seeing high rates of inflation, consumer goods being so expensive that people are either finding their way into a food bank, and in some extreme cases, they're finding their way into being homeless. Which leads into housing, how expensive it is. A 2-bedroom apartment unit in Vancouver costs over $3,000 a month. That's kind of crazy out there. People are moving away from the cities because they're trying to find cheaper places to live. And as far as like speculation taxes and things like that are concerned, that the government is saying that they're in place to cool off the market and to get foreign investors out. But with in a lot of cases, what they're managing to do is, again, hurt the average person. That is not really affecting foreign investors, and or not hurting them enough that they're leaving the market, and that it isn't really helping develop housing for people who really need low income housing. They keep tossing out the word affordable, but what we really need is low income, so that people who want a home, want to be able to rent, can do so. So with that, why don't we listen to what happened in today's press conference with Chrystia Freeland and her other fellow cabinet members as they talk about the Liberal policies as they stand today and what it is that they're looking forward to actually doing.
Hello and welcome to this press conference. I'm Elizabeth Thompson with CBC News. With us today we have Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, Sean Fraser, the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, Jenna Sudds, and the Minister of Small Business, Rechie Valdez. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Ms. Freeland?
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much. Bon matin. Je tiens d'abord à faire le point sur notre nouveau compte d'épargne libre d'impôt pour l'achat d'une première propriété. Je vais ensuite céder la parole au Sean, ministre Fraser, qui nous parlera de l'aide que nous offrons aux fournisseurs de coopératives d'habitation pour qu'ils puissent construire plus de logements plus rapidement pour la population canadienne. Par la suite, la ministre Sudds fera le point sur notre système pan-canadien de services d'apprentissage et de garde des jeunes enfants abordables. Et enfin, la ministre Valdez nous parlera des progrès importants que nous faisons pour faire baisser les frais que les petites entreprises paient au Canada. Earlier this year, our government introduced the new tax-free First Home Savings Account. The tax-free First Home Savings Account allows Canadians to contribute up to $40,000 towards the purchase of their first home. Like an RRSP, contributions are tax deductible, and like a TFSA, withdrawals to purchase a first home, including investment income, are non-taxable. It's tax-free in, tax-free out. For Canadians saving for their first home, the tax-free First Home Savings Account can and is making a real difference. That's why today I'm really delighted to announce that more than 300,000 Canadians have opened a tax-free First Home Savings Account. That is 300,000 Canadians who are one step closer to getting those first keys of their own. I know that housing is the priority for millions of Canadians today. And that's why a central focus of our economic plan is housing. Building more homes faster, making it easier for Canadians to buy a home, and supporting Canadians who rent or already own their home. Through our fall economic statement, our government has continued to take real, concrete action to tackle the housing challenge that is top of mind for so many Canadians. That includes through the new Canadian Mortgage Charter. The Canadian Mortgage Charter details the tailored mortgage relief that Canadians can expect from their banks if they are in a challenging financial situation. That's because our goal is to protect Canadians by making sure they have the support they need to afford their mortgages and keep their homes if they're struggling to renew at a time of higher interest rates. Alors qu'il s'agisse d'aider les gens à épargner en vue d'acheter leur premier logement, de protéger celles et ceux qui ont du mal à payer leur hypothèque ou de bâtir plus de logements plus rapidement, partout au pays, notre gouvernement s'efforcera chaque jour pour obtenir des résultats pour les Canadiennes et les Canadiens et de rendre le logement plus abordable pour le bien de chaque personne d'une nation à l'autre. Merci beaucoup, and I'll pass it over to Sean.
Merci tout le monde. Merci Chrystia pour votre intervention. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I want to talk about cooperative housing this morning. Co-ops are a really important part of the housing ecosystem in Canada, and they currently provide homes to about 250,000 Canadians. What's unique about co-op housing is it creates an opportunity to add homes to the housing supply, but it also keeps rents low in the long term. The way that this works is the people who actually live in cooperative housing developments have a say about how those cooperatives are managed. The way that you get to have a say is by renting a place in a cooperative housing development where you get to vote on how the building's actually going to be managed, how it's going to be maintained, and importantly, what you're going to pay for rent. Because the incentives for the residents of a cooperative housing development are aimed at managing a building appropriately but keeping rents low, we tend to see much lower increases in rent over a long period of time. And we know this works because with 250,000 people living in cooperative housing today, we can demonstrate based on the evidence that the rents paid in cooperative housing are lower than what the market would actually bear because the profit has been removed from the equation, but the costs are going towards properly maintaining a building rather than earning revenue for a private sector actor. One of the things that I'm thrilled to share today is that we're going to be moving forward with a $71 million investment that's going to build or retrofit 1,660 co-op homes across Canada. Of that 1,660, almost 1,200 are going to be new builds, and the balance are going to involve retrofits to existing structures that will protect their ability to continue to provide affordable rent for the long term. What's exciting to me is that although these projects will be spread across Canada, this is the latest investment in cooperative housing across Canada. You will have seen in the recent fall economic statement an additional contribution of $309 million towards more support for co-ops. That's part of a $1.5 billion program that's going to build thousands of new homes in the years ahead. In addition to this direct contribution to building more homes for Canadians, we're also taking the step to scope cooperative housing developments into the GST measures we put in place to incentivize new apartment construction. We want to see more cooperative housing in Canada because we believe this is a unique solution to the housing crisis for many Canadians. I was actually at a co-op development recently, not far from Toronto. It was built about 40 years ago. It's not a coincidence that it was built about 40 years ago. Most cooperative housing in the country is about that old, because that's the last time that the federal government actually invested in cooperative housing of a meaningful scale until the adoption of the National Housing Strategy back in 2017. What we've seen was a lack of investment, not just in cooperative housing, but in affordable housing more broadly. For 30 years, governments, both liberal and conservative, by the way, decided not to make investments in affordable housing. What we've seen as a result is a direct and predictable consequence of fewer non-market homes in this country. Canada has less than 4% of its housing stock offered outside of the market to ensure that low-income families have a place to live. For what it's worth, the OECD average is about 8%. As a result of a sustained lack of investment for decades, Canada now is facing a shortage of affordable housing in the ecosystem that manifests itself in a lot of very challenging ways. Now, we can change that, but not without sustained direct investment by the federal government in affordable housing. One of the things as a public office holder that I find extremely frustrating is there are a range of views on the appropriateness in the House of Commons about whether governments should invest in affordable housing. The Conservative Party of Canada, and I should say specifically their leader Pierre Poilievre, is making comments in public about how the federal government should get out of the housing game. Repeat the mistakes of the past where we have not been making investments for decades and living with the consequences. What's important to me about today's announcement is not just the fact that we're investing to build more than 1,600 homes that will be offered at affordable prices, but that we're going to continue to be making investments in affordable housing across Canada in a sustained way. If we continue to make these investments, we can create an ecosystem that provides for low-income families and make sure that every Canadian has a roof over their head. We cannot afford to make the mistakes of the past and get out of the housing game. And today's announcement demonstrates our continued commitment to building more homes that people can actually afford. Thank you very much. With that, je vais passer la parole à ma collègue, Minister Sudds. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you very much, Sean, and good morning. Thank you, everyone, for being here. In 2021, we set out to transform early learning and childcare here in Canada, to build a Canada-wide system with provinces, territories, and Indigenous partners that was shaped around a shared vision, that all families, no matter where they live, have access to high-quality, affordable, and inclusive early learning and childcare. And 2.5 years later, our plan is working. 6 provinces and territories have delivered on licensed childcare at an average of $10 a day or less, and all jurisdictions have reduced fees by at least 50%. Alors que l'année 2023 tire à sa fin, plusieurs parents auront vu les bénéfices depuis un an. Mais qu'est-ce que cela veut dire concrètement pour les familles? For families in Newfoundland who have seen their fees reduced to $10 a day, this means savings of up to $6,300 annually per child. That $6,300 could offset rent and enable a growing family to move from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom apartment. In Ontario, families are saving up to $8,500 every year. And that's hundreds of dollars each month back into the pockets of hardworking families. For Ontario families with 2 children, that's $17,000 a year staying in their bank account. I've heard from parents across the country the transformative impact that these savings have had on their lives. However, this is about more than just reducing fees. One thing that the pandemic has certainly made clear is that without childcare, parents, especially mothers, cannot return to work. If we are to build a more inclusive, resilient economy, we must also build an economy that supports all women and removes barrier to full participation in the workforce. Our government will continue, as we have since 2015, to advance gender equality and inclusion in all of the work that we do. When childcare becomes more affordable and spaces become more accessible, women have more opportunities to pursue their career and to grow and support the economy. For many parts of the country, labor force participation among working-aged mothers with young children has never been this high, nearing 80% over the last 12 months. While there are many contributing factors to that, we know that our investments in childcare are supporting more women entering the workforce. As we build and create more spaces across the country, we provide more women the opportunity to reach their full economic potential. Our goal is to create 250,000 new childcare spaces across the country by 2026. Doing so will ensure maximum social and economic impact of our investments in early learning and childcare. As we near the end of this year of 2023, I am happy to share that we have over 80,000 new spaces that have already been announced. That's over 80,000 children who will have access to high-quality, affordable spaces where they can learn and grow. In Nova Scotia, we're seeing new childcare spaces for infants and toddlers, including places like Pictou and Cumberland County. Au Nouveau-Brunswick, des places de garde francophones supplémentaires seront disponibles dans des communautés comme Dieppe et Dalhousie. And recently I was in London, Ontario, to announce that almost 3,000 additional spaces would be created across the city by 2026. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that it does take more than bricks and mortar to make a space. We need the talented and dedicated educators who are the cornerstone of our childcare system. Early childhood educators are truly the heart of the nationwide system that we are building. C'est pourquoi nous collaborons avec nos partenaires provinciaux et territoriaux afin de mettre en œuvre des mesures pour recruter et maintenir en poste cette main-d'œuvre essentielle. The childcare workforce is critical to Canada's economic success and the success of our Canada-wide system. Not only do they provide essential service to support labor force participation, but they also educate and develop the future leaders of our great country. What we are doing is truly transformative. It's not just good feminist policy, it's also good social policy and smart economic policy. Il s'agit d'un plan visant à stimuler la croissance économique, à permettre aux parents, spécialement aux mères, d'entrer ou de revenir sur le marché du travail, à soutenir les familles et à offrir à chaque enfant du Canada les meilleurs départs possibles dans la vie. I remain committed to working with my colleagues across Canada and those with me here today so that more families have access to affordable, high-quality childcare. Thank you very much, and I will pass it to my colleague, Rechie.
Thank you, Jenna. And I can certainly attest that more women have entered the workforce and have chosen even entrepreneurship and opening their own small business as well. So good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Today is a great day for Canada's small business owners and entrepreneurs. By finalizing commitments from Visa and MasterCard to reduce credit card transaction and interchange fees, we are removing a weight from the shoulders of small businesses, from small business owners from coast to coast to coast. These reductions will collectively put $1 billion back into the pockets of eligible small businesses over 5 years. As a former small business owner myself, I know that it's never been easy to build a business from the ground up. And that's especially true for in these last few years with the rising inflation and interest hikes. Nous savons qu'à cœur de leur communauté, c'est ce progrès qui compte le plus. This is in addition to the supports our government is already delivering for small business owners, from cutting costs and taxes for growing small businesses from 11% to 9%, to policies designed to create a more inclusive entrepreneurship environment. Our government is always a champion for all entrepreneurs, no matter who they are, no matter where they are with their business. Since my appointment, I've been across the country meeting with chambers of commerce, boards of trade, downtown business improvement associations, and small business owners to hear what they need and how I and we can better help them in my new role. As we recognize the contributions for small business owners that they make in our communities and in our country, we have an obligation to clear any and as many hurdles as we can and break down as many barriers on their path to success. I'm very happy to say that this is precisely what we've done today and will continue to do. Et nous continuerons à les accompagner à chaque étape de leur parcours. Thank you and merci.
Okay, in this next segment, it's just a scrum of statements from MPs talking about policies and problems that exist in our society and how we should be reacting to it and what is going to be done to react to it.
I don't have a lengthy set of remarks for you guys today. I just am going to be away the second half of the week in BC, so I thought I'd make myself available if you guys had any chats before we get underway this week.
What do you think of Pierre Poilievre's video on housing?
Look, I think if he would be well served if he put as much effort into advancing new housing policies as he does into producing videos. When I actually look at the plan that he's putting forward, my view is it is going to result in fewer homes being built than we are already on pace for. I see that he's focused on putting the GST back on certain homes. I see that he's focused on cutting money that's going directly to cities. It's currently having systemic impacts in the way they build homes. And I see he's making comments publicly about how the government needs to get out of the housing game. Nothing could be further from the truth. So regardless of what video he puts forward, we're going to do the hard work of getting policies adopted.
What do you think, though? What do you think of the fact that he's clearly touching on a nerve, which this is borne out in data, that a lot of Canadians are really frustrated about the fact that they are having more and more trouble finding a place to put a roof over their heads and struggling to be able to even get into the housing game, let alone, try and upgrade a home. How are you responding to that palpable anger that people are experiencing?
Yeah, the anxiety is real. When I talk to young people who don't see an opportunity for themselves to get into the housing market, there's enormous frustration. When I talk to seniors who are looking to downsize, all they want is to live in the neighborhoods where their grandkids are being raised. People who are working shouldn't have to be commuting an hour and a half to get to a place so they can put food on the table for their families. And I don't want to diminish the very real impact that a housing shortage is causing. What I find unfortunate is it seems the Conservatives' approach is to try to inspire people to hate their political opponent rather than to adopt policies that are actually going to help those people. When I think what's going to help that young person, it's going to be building more apartments so we can bring the cost down. It's going to be creating programs that allow them to actually save up for the first down payment. When I think about what's going to help that senior, I think about shifting our policies so we can expand access to builders who are actually going to be putting up seniors apartments in communities across the country. When I think about some people who are dealing with the increased rate of borrowing driven by forces across the world on the heels of the pandemic, we need to make sure they're aware of the policies that their banks can provide to actually reduce the cost of borrowing on a month-to-month basis. The anxiety is real, the frustration is real, but if you actually ask yourself, who are you trying to help? You'll be far better served because you're going to direct your energy towards adopting policies to help them rather than something that will incite anger in a politically opportune move rather than a policy move that's going to serve people's interests. So I told David I'd come to him, but I'll stay.
Just a couple of questions on the Rapid Housing Initiative. The first one is really, speaking to experts, you thought, pretty good program. It actually did deliver housing rapidly, but we're kind of hoping it would be refreshed in the fall economic statement or the budget. Can you speak to that particular program and where it fits in the portfolio of other federal housing programs?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. And keep in mind that we came back into investing in affordable housing in 2017 after 30 years of both Liberal and Conservative governments stepping away. The Rapid Housing Initiative was a very specific policy innovation designed to deal with pandemic-related restrictions that needed to get buildings built very quickly. We covered, in some instances, the entire cost of building some of these things. It was an expensive program, but it delivered results quickly, and that was right for that moment in time. We've now recapitalized our affordable housing programs in the fall economic statement and are looking at new ways that we can modify the affordable housing fund going forward so we can both address the short-term needs of people who need safe shelter, but also provide an opportunity that will both build quickly affordable housing in communities without compromising on the ability to leverage funding from other levels of government or from other builders who might be pulling funding from the community. So we're now looking at further revisions to the structure of the fund after the fall economic statement recapitalized it to some degree.
And just to follow up, I had a chance to sort of analyze where the projects were, and turns out for whatever reason, if you were a New Democrat, you got way more RHI funding, and people who lived in conservative ridings got a way disproportionately less amount of money. Liberal ridings seem to get about this proportion to where people live. I'm sure that wasn't the intention, but it had that partisan skew. I just wondered, maybe you have some thoughts or observations about how that might happen?
Yeah, sure. So I can assure you that there's not decisions taken to deliberately fund one opposition party more than the governing party and one opposition party less. It's a function of the projects that come into the fund for application that meet scoring criteria. If I look at other programs, it will come as no surprise if Nova Scotia doesn't get as much from Agriculture Canada as the prairies do, and nor does DFO put as much in small craft harbors in Manitoba as it does in Atlantic Canada. When you actually look look at the problem that the Rapid Housing Initiative was trying to solve, it was trying to help with people who were without a home, which disproportionately, though not exclusively, has been taking place to a different degree in large urban environments. What we've seen leading up to the pandemic, during the pandemic, was there was a disproportionate need in those large urban environments, which, if you look at the composition of the House of Commons, tends to have more New Democrat members than Liberal members and then Conservative members. I have seen, and I'll be interested to see how this pans out in the years ahead, over the course of the last year and a half or so, the housing needs are certainly no longer just for low-income Canadians and certainly no longer restricted to the bounds of large urban communities. They were prevalent before, but they feel acute in every community across Canada. As the landscape shifts, I expect applications from community groups, some of whom are just getting started for the first time, may shift as well, and time will tell what the impact will be on the partisan breakdown of funding, but to your point, it's driven more by the demographics represented by parties in the House and the areas of the country they represent, rather than a decision I would have taken to disproportionately fund New Democrat ridings.
J'aimerais revenir sur la vidéo de Pierre Poilievre. Oui, j'aimerais revenir, s'il vous plaît, sur la vidéo de Pierre Poilievre, et si vous vous sentez plus à l'aise de répondre en anglais, allez-y en anglais, mais j'essaie quand même en français. J'ai pas entendu de votre part l'aspect de cette vidéo de 16 minutes qui fait que, selon vous, son plan n'est pas un bon plan. Moi, j'ai regardé la vidéo, je me suis fait mon opinion, mais pourquoi vous trouvez que son plan, c'est pas un bon plan? C'est pas clair, ce que vous dites.
OK, c'est important pour moi juste de clarifier. Je ne suis pas en accord avec M. Poilievre sur le plan pour construire beaucoup de logements. J'ai un plan pour améliorer le système de logement, pour construire beaucoup de logements partout dans notre pays. Mais quand j'ai regardé le plan de M. Poilievre, il y a un plan pour augmenter le taux d'impôt pour réétablir le TPS sur des appartements, pas pour chaque appartement, mais pour quelques appartements dans le spectrum de logement. C'est aussi important de comprendre, M. Poilievre déclare avec fierté, il a coupé le programme pour accélérer la construction de logements. Maintenant, j'ai beaucoup des accords avec des cités partout au Canada et avec la province de Québec aussi. Et M. Poilievre a un plan pour couper ce programme et remplacer ce programme avec une idée très mauvaise. Parce que le plan n'inclut pas d'argent pour soutenir des efforts de communauté dans les politiques, dans la juridiction de la municipalité. Il veut de couper les fonds pour l'infrastructure si les cités ne construisent pas du logement. Mais c'est impossible pour des communautés de construire du logement sans des fonds pour investir dans l'infrastructure aussi.
Did he really say all of this, or are you just inferring from what he's saying? I haven't heard him say it that way.
Okay, he has specifically, on the Housing Accelerator Fund, say he plans to cut that fund. His plan to replace it, I think he's calling a super fund, only applies to about 22 cities across the country. I may have the number wrong, but in that ballpark. It does not apply to cities all across the country. He has said he wants to cut it, and the way that he has structured that program is to only reward cities based on housing output, and saying he'll deny the very infrastructure funds that cities are telling me they actually need to enable them to meet the targets that they are setting. So when I look at his plan to put the GST back on some of these programs, when I look at his plan to cut the infrastructure fund for cities who are trying to build more housing, it simply makes no sense. But the one that shocked me more than any is just a few weeks ago, he said proudly that he was planning on having the federal government get out of the housing game during a visit in Western Canada. We made that mistake for 30 years in Canada, from the late 80s, mostly in the early 90s, but then for successive Liberal and Conservative governments, Canada didn't invest in affordable housing. We are now living with the direct and predictable consequence of an affordable housing shortage that is causing widespread problems across Canada. We started investing again in 2017. We need to continue to do more, but it's going to take years to catch up after 30 years of choosing not to be a player in this space. We cannot afford to make the same mistakes we've made in the past.
Minister, with all due respect, according to a number of public opinion polls, there's an indication that housing is one of the top issues, also the cost of living, that Canadians are worried about. And the data is indicating that, in some ways, that the Liberals have lost support over this. This is one of the major reasons why the Conservatives are seeing such an uptick in support. So I hear what you're saying, but do you acknowledge that perhaps the Liberals have lost some support over this issue, and how are you going to win people back?
So you're absolutely right to point out there's widespread frustration, and at times with the Government of Canada, at times with provincial governments, at times with municipal governments, depending on which part of Canada that you live in right now. One of the reasons I think we're seeing that source of frustration with government policy is for the first number of years that we were in office, our housing policies were directed at affordable housing for low-income families and supporting the most vulnerable. What we've seen on the heels of the pandemic, now after this period of low interest rates where investors were buying up housing and communities across country are feeling a very serious housing pinch, the need is far more widespread. We're dealing with a level of frustration in every part of the country, with young people who can't afford a home, with workers who are commuting more than an hour to get to work, with seniors, as I mentioned, who can't find an opportunity to live in the same community as their grandkids. We are shifting our policy approach, and you will have noticed a marked difference in the range of different areas we're trying to target with our housing policy since September. So we can speak not only to the needs of low-income families who deserve to have a roof over their head, but also to middle-class families who are trying to get into the market for the first time, for young people who are struggling with the cost of rent every month, which is eating away at their ability to enjoy a night out once in a while with their friends and just to exist and enjoy life as a full participant in their community. So yes, people are frustrated. Perhaps we could have or should have moved in this direction even sooner than we did. But the reality is I understand the anxiety that people are sharing with me because they're telling me directly. I'm meeting with them. I'm coming to understand the nature of their problem. But importantly, when I leave those conversations, I'm going to do the hard work of developing policies that are actually going to serve their interests. You'll see in the months ahead, I hope, is continued progress, more investment to build more homes at prices that people can actually afford. So it's incumbent on me not to just look at the political polls of the day, but to understand what people are feeling and then advancing policies that are actually going to help. And if I could differentiate our plan from the one that Pierre Poilievre has put forward, it's that last part. Doing the work to develop the policies that are actually going to help is the one advantage that I believe we have over the Conservative Party of Canada. And lo and behold, you adopt policies that help people. Over time, I believe they'll reward you. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Merci tout le monde.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Alistair McGregor. I serve as the NDP's critic for agriculture and agri-food, and also food price inflation. I'm here with my colleague Alexandra Boularice. So today, later this afternoon, at the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, you may have heard that we have Michael Medline, the CEO of Sobeys, who is appearing before our committee. We're doing this because we're fast approaching the holiday season, and right now we have a record number of Canadians who are having to access food banks. And this has been a trend for the last 23, 24 months where people have seen food prices just absolutely skyrocket. It's gone beyond how many people can actually go and afford food. So today we're calling the CEO to come before our committee because, you know, a pretty strong commitment was made by the Minister of Industry and the CEOs to quote unquote stabilize food prices. And I think for any Canadian who's watching, they'll see that that has not been the case. So today our committee is focused on getting answers. What exactly is the plan? How is it going to result in lowered or stabilized food prices? And we have to put this in the context. Like Mr. Medline received a compensation of about $8.6 million last year. And right now, some of his employees are on strike in Halifax, and they are only being offered a 5-cent increase over minimum wage. We know that the quarterly profits, if you compared last quarter's profits of Empire to the previous years, there has been approximately a 39% increase. And meanwhile, we have a record number of people trying to go to the food bank just to feed their families. So these things are true. We owe it to Canadians as parliamentarians to dig down into this issue to get answers. And I'm looking forward to hearing from the CEO today, but also being able to ask him some questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Alexandra for some comments in French.
Merci Alistair de tes commentaires. La situation est absolument épouvantable, c'est incroyable, c'est du jamais vu. C'est rendu qu'au Québec, un Québécois sur 10 fait appel aux banques alimentaires et c'est la plupart du temps maintenant des gens qui travaillent, qui sont sur le marché du travail mais qui n'arrivent plus à nourrir leurs enfants, qui doivent faire des choix extrêmement difficiles. Ça fait pratiquement 2 ans de suite que l'augmentation du prix des aliments est au-dessus de l'augmentation de l'inflation moyenne. Alors les gens évidemment en arrachent. Dans Rosemont, la petite patrie, les banques alimentaires débordent, les gens appellent au bureau. Vraiment, ils sont absolument désespérés. Puis pendant ce temps-là, qu'est-ce qu'on voit? Bien, on voit des grandes chaînes d'épicerie qui font des profits records, des PDG qui s'en mettent plein les poches. Puis là, cet après-midi, il y a le patron de Sobeys qui va être au comité de l'agriculture grâce à une motion du NPD où ce PDG va devoir répondre aux questions de mon collègue Alistair McGregor, puis du NPD en général, sur qu'est-ce qu'il va faire pour aider les gens. Est-ce qu'il va arrêter sa cupidité puis son avarice? Puis on en est rendu là de demander au patron de faire des efforts parce qu'on ne peut pas compter sur le Parti libéral puis le gouvernement libéral pour faire ce qu'il faut. Ils ne veulent pas de code de conduite des épiciers, sauf si c'est les épiciers qui l'écrivent eux-mêmes, ce qui est ridicule. M. Champagne fait venir ici les PDG des grandes chaînes d'alimentation pour leur dire, s'il vous plaît, par pitié, faites quelque chose pour stabiliser les prix. Puis on apprend il y a 2 semaines, par la bouche du PDG de Métro, que cette conversation puis cette réunion-là a absolument rien changé. Alors c'est vraiment honteux. L'inaction des libéraux fait très, très mal aux gens. Il ne faut pas compter sur les conservateurs pour faire quoi que ce soit dans ce domaine-là, évidemment. Alors, le NPD, nous, on agit, on a des solutions. On fait venir quelqu'un qui va devoir témoigner publiquement puis répondre aux questions des députés du comité de l'agriculture. C'est ça qu'on fait. Puis on demande aux libéraux de se réveiller. Puis là, on est 3 semaines avant Noël. Là. Les gens, ils ne savent pas comment ils vont être capables d'avoir un bon réveillon de Noël. Alors, s'il vous plaît, agissez.
Sur une question différente, si vous me le permettez, il y a 2 sujets qui nous préoccupent. J'aimerais commencer avec ce qui s'est passé en Chambre ce matin. Et le parti du Bloc québécois qui demande la démission de M. Fergus, le Parti conservateur qui dit qu'il est en position d'outrage au Parlement. Quelle est la position du NPD sur ce qui s'est passé avec M. Fergus?
Sur ce qui s'est passé en Chambre, je vous dirais que j'étais dans un train qui était en retard à cause de la tempête de neige, donc je n'irai pas dans les détails. Par contre, dans le scandale qui entoure le président de la Chambre des communes, c'est un scandale. C'est un manque de jugement flagrant de la part de M. Fergus d'avoir fait cette vidéo pour féliciter quelqu'un qui a été chef par intérim du Parti libéral de l'Ontario. Il dit qu'il le fait à titre personnel en portant la toge du président de la Chambre. Alors vraiment, il y a un mélange des genres entre la partisanerie, l'amitié, puis l'institution parlementaire, parce que le président, il nous représente tous, de tous les partis politiques, et il n'y a pas à faire ce genre d'intervention. Alors, vous allez entendre tantôt le leader parlementaire du NPD, Peter Julian, intervenir en Chambre sur ce sujet-là. Il va faire des demandes auprès de M. Fergus, puis on verra si M. Fergus va prendre ses responsabilités dans cette affaire-là. On verra quelle est la réaction du président de la Chambre. J'ai hâte d'entendre, on va entendre le leader en Chambre du NPD. On va voir comment le président de la Chambre va réagir. Ensuite de ça, on fera notre opinion. C'est un petit peu tôt, là, pour grimper dans les rideaux.
Est-ce que c'est suffisant, des excuses, s'il s'excuse?
Moi, j'ai hâte de l'entendre suite à l'intervention de mon collègue Peter Julian.
And have the grocers submitted their plans, or do they have plans to submit their plans to lower food costs to the committee? Sorry for the word jumble.
No worries. I understand. As a part of the motion that I brought forward at committee, part of that motion included us sending for the corporate documents. They were submitted. Some were faster than others, and some had more detail than others. A part of that submission was an agreement from the committee that we would keep everything confidential and in camera. But I can tell you, after having reviewed the documents over the last couple of weeks, that I walked away quite unimpressed. And to tell you the truth, a lot of the information contained in these so-called confidential documents are stuff I could have found by reviewing their weekly flyers and looking with a simple Google search.
Si je peux me permettre, à propos des compressions qui seront annoncées cet après-midi à Radio-Canada, vos pensées là-dessus sur le monde des médias en général?
Bien, écoutez, c'est une situation qui est absolument catastrophique. C'est une menace à la démocratie puis au débat public. Ça fait des années qu'on perd des journalistes, des reporters, qu'il y a des salles de nouvelles qui ferment par centaines partout à travers le pays. On a vu des compressions majeures à TVA récemment. Puis là, la mauvaise nouvelle de ces compressions à Radio-Canada et CBC, ça vient juste ajouter à cette situation qui est absolument dramatique. Je m'inquiète pour ces travailleurs et ces travailleuses-là. mais je m'inquiète aussi pour la qualité de notre débat public et le fait qu'on puisse avoir ce contre-pouvoir absolument essentiel dans une société démocratique, puis des gens qui posent des questions difficiles, qui se basent sur les faits, sur la science, sur la rationalité. Si on a juste des chroniqueurs puis il y a juste de l'opinion, je suis pas sûr qu'on va s'en sortir grandi comme société.
À propos des épiciers,
oui.
Le gouvernement nous dit qu'il y a un plan. M. Allister dit « J'ai vu le plan, il n'y a pas grand-chose là-dedans ». Qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire avec ce plan-là? Les Canadiens se font dire qu'il y a un plan, mais ils ne voient pas les résultats. Vous en pensez?
Bien, premièrement, il faudrait que ça soit carte sur table. Je ne pense pas qu'il y a beaucoup de gens qui ont vu ce plan-là. Pour l'instant, le plan du ministre Champagne, ça semble être une supplique puis une prière en disant « S'il vous plaît, aidez-moi, faites quelque chose ». Puis de se dire « Ah! Regardez, il y a des spéciaux dans le circulaire, tout va bien, mon plan fonctionne. » C'est pas vrai, il y a des spéciaux dans le circulaire tout le temps. Puis de toute façon, les prix des aliments augmentent puis sont trop chers pour beaucoup de familles. Qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire? Bien, on a mis des choses de l'avant, nous, au NPD. Il faut taxer les surprofits de ces grandes chaînes d'alimentation qui vraiment font des profits sur la misère des gens puis la misère des parents qui ont de la difficulté à nourrir leurs enfants. Et ça, c'est une mesure concrète où les PDG y penseraient à deux fois avant d'augmenter les prix pour rien. Si finalement, financièrement, ça finit par leur faire mal, il faut aussi avoir un code de conduite, puis un code de conduite qui ne serait pas autoproclamé par les épiciers. Hein? Il faudrait que ça soit quelque chose d'un peu plus sérieux que ça.
François-Philippe Champagne, est-ce que c'est un bon ministre, selon vous? Est-ce que c'est quelqu'un de confiance pour mettre ça en place?
Bien, je pense que M. Champagne a une attitude un peu jovialiste, un peu déconnectée de la misère des gens puis de ce qui se passe pour vrai sur le terrain, dans la rue. Alors, il est tout le temps très de bonne humeur. Je pense qu'il aurait besoin d'être un petit peu plus fâché des fois. Merci.
Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Écoutez, en réaction à ce qu'on a entendu, les coupes de Radio-Canada, évidemment, 600 postes. C'est extrêmement important. On ne peut pas rester de marbre par rapport à ça. Radio-Canada, 250 coupes, 250 emplois perdus. CBC, la même chose, alors que tu as 3 fois plus d'auditoire à Radio-Canada, et plus de 3 fois. Et en plus que le français est en déclin, on est un peu déçus de voir que les coupes sont aussi sévères chez Radio-Canada que chez CBC. On a de la misère à s'expliquer ça. L'énoncé économique de la 2 semaines, vous savez que Radio-Canada, le bailleur de fonds, c'est le gouvernement fédéral, et on n'a eu aucune nouvelle de ça dans l'énoncé économique. Aucun drapeau blanc n'a été levé pour justement questionner ce qui allait se passer avec Radio-Canada. Ça veut dire que s'il y a des coupes aujourd'hui, c'est parce que le gouvernement du Canada n'a pas donné suite aux besoins de Radio-Canada, et on peut le comprendre facilement que c'est la raison pourquoi il y a eu ce genre de coupe-là. Ça va toucher évidemment l'information régionale, mais dans son ensemble, la qualité de l'information. Vous savez, on vit dans un monde où les médias sociaux sont omniprésents. Ça prend de l'information qu'on assure étant de qualité pour qu'on puisse justement éclairer, informer et, dans un dernier temps, dans le cas de la radio, de la télévision publique, divertir aussi. Alors, nous, on est vraiment très insatisfaits de voir cette situation-là. Et on est de tout cœur avec les familles, les gens qui vont avoir à perdre leur travail, et évidemment, les familles aussi. On trouve ça très, très difficile pour ces gens-là. Et on est de tout cœur avec eux. Voilà, en gros, le message que je voulais donner par rapport à cette mauvaise nouvelle-là.
Concernant le financement, il y a évidemment l'entente avec Google qui est intervenue la semaine dernière. Puis le Bloc québécois s'est clairement positionné, tout comme le gouvernement du Québec, en disant que Radio-Canada devrait être exclu de cette entente-là. Devant l'annonce aujourd'hui des coupures, est-ce que c'est une position que vous maintenez?
Oui, écoutez, l'entente avec Google, nous, on considère que cet argent-là devrait aller aux médias qui n'ont pas le financement public de garantie d'une certaine façon. Et nous, on pense que Radio-Canada devrait avoir l'assurance de la part du gouvernement, avec le financement adéquat, que ces services vont être maintenus, ces services au niveau de l'information et au niveau, justement, de l'activité régionale. Et donc, c'est le rôle du gouvernement. Ils ont l'avantage sur les autres médias qui sont financés en grande partie par le gouvernement. Et nous, on veut que le gouvernement fasse son travail et qu'il pige, justement, dans les deniers publics pour assurer une pérennité des activités de Radio-Canada, surtout en information et en information régionale.
Mais en dehors de ces ententes de financement-là qui viendraient des géants du Web, là.
Pardon, excusez-moi.
Complètement en dehors de ces ententes-là qui pourraient être des sources de financement extérieures au gouvernement.
Exact. Bien, c'est parce que, exactement, c'est que Radio-Canada n'est pas dans la même situation que les autres médias d'information. Je veux dire, c'est la responsabilité du gouvernement. C'était ça l'idée de créer Radio-Canada, c'était de garantir que la population soit bien informée, qu'il y ait une information costaude, disponible, coast to coast to coast, comme disent les Canadiens. Bien, je pense que c'était le travail à faire de la part du gouvernement de s'assurer que le financement soit adéquat pour arriver à faire vivre Radio-Canada adéquatement avec tous les services qu'il donne depuis déjà fort longtemps.
Il y a des coupures qui ont été demandées, notamment dans les sociétés d'État, et Radio-Canada est touché de couper un 3 et ça représente environ 32 millions de dollars dans l'ensemble des coupures qui seront faites. Est-ce que là-dessus, le gouvernement peut agir? Est-ce que c'est là que le gouvernement doit peut-être lever le pied sur la pédale, sur le frein, puis dire, bon, bien, on pourrait exempter Radio-Canada de ces coupures-là?
Bien, écoutez, quand vous avez une télévision d'État et une radio qui est aussi importante et qu'on arrive avec des coupures majeures comme ça, je pense que la réflexion que le gouvernement doit se faire, c'est qu'il faut préserver, protéger cette information-là. Et donc, dans ce cas-là, c'est s'assurer que le financement soit adéquat. Si tu arrives avec des mesures qui sont des mesures mur à mur, qui viennent justement abîmer la qualité de l'information, bien, je pense que c'est à réfléchir. Il faut s'assurer que l'argent soit là. Et donc, on ne peut pas dire, bien voici, on va faire une règle mur à mur, et si Radio-Canada subit les offres de ça, bien coudonc. Moi, je pense qu'il faut que l'information soit préservée, protégée, plus que jamais. Et Radio-Canada a un rôle à jouer, il fait bien son rôle, il faut qu'il continue le travail. C'est la francophonie au Canada qui, en partie, en dépend. Et le français est en déclin aussi bien au Québec et au Canada. Et je pense que le gouvernement a un rôle à jouer. Quand on parle d'agir contre le déclin du français, bien, c'est un élément, c'est un outil qui est indispensable pour y arriver.
Quand on regarde une petite dernière, TVA coupée du tiers, de 31 de ses effectifs, Radio-Canada 10 qu'est-ce que ça dit aux francophones et aux gens qui habitent en région au Québec? Est-ce que c'est ce public-là qui est mis de côté?
Bien, quand on voit les résultats de ces coupes-là, ce qu'on s'aperçoit, c'est justement l'activité régionale de ces genres de ces médias d'information. C'est les premiers à subir les coupes. Alors que, tu sais, quand on parle de faire vivre la francophonie, de faire en sorte que les régions soient prospères, qu'on s'établisse en région, qu'on soit bien, qu'il y ait des services qui puissent justement faire rayonner les régions. Bien, à quelque part, quand vous coupez dans ces genres de services-là, bien, on ne se rend pas service à personne. Et c'est pour ça que c'est important que les médias puissent survivre et prospérer, même, on souhaite qu'ils prospèrent au niveau des régions et à travers le Québec et le Canada pour la francophonie. Je pense que c'est essentiel.
J'ai peut-être manqué le début, là. Quel est votre message pour Mme Saint-Onge?
Le message, mais écoutez, voilà 2 semaines, là, l'énoncé économique, on ne parle pas de ça du tout. Aucun drapeau est levé. On n'entend pas parler de ça. Et là, on arrive 2 semaines plus tard avec des coupes quand même majeures, parce que l'argent n'est pas là, parce que le gouvernement ne fait pas sa part, parce que le gouvernement a décidé de couper à Radio-Canada alors qu'ils ont 3 fois plus d'auditoire que CBC. Ils coupent la même chose, le nombre d'emplois, 250 d'un côté, 250 de l'autre. Alors, pour la prospérité et la présence du français au Canada qui est menacée, et aussi, évidemment, de faire en sorte que l'information dans les régions au niveau national garde sa richesse et sa qualité. Moi, je pense qu'il aurait fallu, il y a 2 semaines, dire dans l'énoncé économique, on va faire en sorte que Radio-Canada continue à offrir les services adéquats à la population. La population en a besoin. On est dans une situation actuellement où les médias sont mis à rude épreuve. Il faut les aider. Et la job du gouvernement, c'est d'aider au minimum, la société d'État. Et donc, c'est le message qu'on envoie. Vous avez causé des pertes d'emplois dans un domaine où la culture dépend de ça, la vitalité du français dépend de ça, et la vitalité des régions aussi dépend de ça. Vous avez une responsabilité face aux Québécois, face aux Canadiens.
Est-ce que je décote que vous dites que la proportion des compressions entre CBC et Radio-Canada est injuste? Et donc, dans ce cas-là, quelle serait la proportion que...
Alors, moi, je n'irai pas dans les proportions. Je dirais que, vous coupez 250 postes à Radio-Canada, alors qu'on a 3 fois plus d'auditoire et plus de Radio-Canada que de CBC, première des choses. Je veux dire, où est la logique là-dedans? Mais idéalement, moi, je ne veux pas parler de CBC, OK? Moi, je vous parle de Radio-Canada. Idéalement, ces gens-là doivent garder leur travail. C'est essentiel à la démocratie, à la qualité de l'information, aux régions qui veulent avoir l'information de chez nous, une activité régionale qui puisse prospérer. C'est ça le message. On ne doit pas couper à ce moment-ci, dans notre histoire, l'argent qu'on verse à des médias. Évidemment, l'État a la responsabilité que l'appareil public médiatique doit survivre et bien survivre, évidemment.
J'ai cru comprendre que vous ne faites plus confiance à M. Fergus. Pour moi qui travaille sur ce dossier-là, est-ce que c'est bien le cas?
Bien, écoutez, vous savez, avant lui, il y avait M. Rota qui a perdu son travail, qui est obligé de démissionner par un grave manque de jugement. Et donc, tu arrives président après avoir vécu cette situation assez problématique pour l'ensemble de la démocratie canadienne. Tu arrives comme président, et à peu près 2 mois après que tu sois arrivé sur le trône, tu fais non pas seulement une faute de jugement, mais tu n'es pas impartial, alors que les 2 qualités fondamentales d'un président de la Chambre, c'est d'avoir un jugement solide et, évidemment, une impartialité à toute épreuve. C'est les deux rôles, pas les 2 rôles, mais c'est les 2 qualités qu'il doit avoir. Et en fin de semaine, il nous a montré clairement que ces 2 qualités-là, il les a pas. Alors, nous, on demande sa démission. On fait en sorte, de cette façon-là, qu'on ne laisse pas traîner les choses parce que les activités à la Chambre dépendent d'un président qui est capable de gérer la Chambre correctement. Et on pense qu'il nous a montré que c'était plus le cas.
Mais comment avez-vous pu vous tromper à ce point sur M. Fergus pour demander sa démission 2 mois après son élection?
Est-ce que vous avez vu les résultats du vote?
Non, mais
Okay.
la Chambre a voté quand même en
J'ai
faveur.
pas d'autres questions que ça. Je ne sais pas. C'est un vote secret.
Il a été élu quand même, M.
Oui, il a été
Rota,
élu.
donc
Il y a 338 députés qui ont voté. Il y avait besoin.
Il croyait quand même.
Il y avait 169 votes nécessaires pour qu'il soit élu. Moi, je peux vous dire, il y en a eu plus que 169. Ça, c'est garanti. Combien de plus, je ne sais pas. Et qui a voté pour M. Fergus, je ne le sais pas non plus.
Compte tenu qu'il y a eu une élection aussi serrée, pourquoi ne pas lui donner une autre chance?
On ne le sait pas. On ne sait pas. Vous parlez de résultat de l'élection, mais on ne sait pas le résultat de l'élection. Non, je n'ai pas dit ça. J'ai juste dit, vous me posez la question à savoir, moi, pourquoi je lui ai fait confiance. Je vous dis que le vote est secret, puis que moi, ce que je peux vous dire, c'est que la majorité de la Chambre lui a donné sa confiance. Et après un épisode aussi houleux que celui de M. Rota en fin de règne, moi, je pense qu'il avait le devoir d'être solide, d'avoir un jugement sans faille et une impartialité à toute épreuve, et ce n'est pas le cas. Voilà. Merci.
Oh, it's a sad day. I mean, when I read, I think Ms. Tate said 100 million. That's serious numbers. But you know, funny, because on the weekend I talked to several media people back home, and it's bleeding more than ever. And so this is just a continuation. And I don't know the way out. I really don't. I mean, we had the agreement, or the government had the so-called agreement with Google. Nobody knows where that money's going. But at the same time, when people lose their job in the industry, it's sad.
Is there a way, do you think, of refining the mandate so that, CBC Radio Canada is asked to do many things? Are there some things that should be reduced, do you think? I'm asking you
Chris, as a former broadcaster, we're all asked to do more with less. Right? Every one of us. I mean, there was a time they asked me to carry a camera. I didn't do that. But, I mean, everybody is doing more in the industry with less. So, I don't know what's going on in CBC, and I don't know what's going on in several CTV networks that continue to reduce staff. But I know they're hemorrhaging right now with the advertising dollars. You see it. And I see it quite a bit with promos during football games, if you don't mind me saying. And it's a concern. So when I saw the 100 million number today for CBC, that's a lot of money. And so I don't know if they're getting ready for some Google money or what is going to happen, but at the same time, private and now public have had to answer to the downturn in the advertising dollars.
Is there, my position, I can't advocate for things, but do you think there should be a change in government direction, or is it we just carry on? I don't know.
It's tough. I think the radio is very good on CBC. Television, everything's changing. I mean, I see Sandy Ronaldo doing a 5:30 to 6 now, so I just know in my province we're seeing less local news. In Saskatoon, we only have 2 hours a day on CTV now. The rest is out of Regina. So it's far be it from me to have the answers for the industry, but I see everywhere in this country they're hurting. And CBC got theirs today, and it's not good.
And I just for clarity, as Deputy Heritage Critic for the official opposition, do you have any...
Well, I'm
recapping.
Yeah, no, it's a tough day in the industry. Nobody wants to see what happens. We had the massive layoff in June by Bell Media, 1,300 plus, and then today, CBC. Nobody wants to see that. The newspaper industry is hurting, as everybody knows. They're losing millions of dollars. I don't have any answers, but I can tell you it's a crash landing that's happening, and it's not going to be good. We're seeing casualties everywhere in the business. And my fear is, when I was in there, we always had new people coming up. We don't have a lot of new people getting into the business now. And that is really worrisome because where are you going to get your strength from new people coming into the business and taking a gamble to have a 30 or 40-year career in the business, because it's not there anymore, and they know that. And to me, it's a concern for 2 reasons. One, you need experience in any newsroom in this country to help out those that are coming in, and those that have experience have seen it all, and they have background. And number 2, when you get a young person in the business, it's a great business, or it has been a great business, and now to see it deteriorate to where it's going, it's got to be particularly tough on young people looking forward to carving out a career, whether it's in newspaper, radio, television, or whatever. It's got to be a tough place to be right now, when you're thinking, do I go to broadcast school or not? Because there's other options, and unfortunately we're losing some good people in the business now.
Can I just get a wide shot of that? And just because you've done this, just for the cutaway, remind me, you were...
I was at CTV for 39 and a half years. We did radio and TV, and then, they sold the radio in 1992, so we just did TV. But they don't do sports anymore. When I left in 2015, we used to have 6 minutes at 6. We used to have 10, 12 minutes late night. Used to do weekends. Used to do nights. Late nights. Don't do any of that anymore. Can't get any highlights from anything. It's the sport industry is gone in this country. The local. I see it everywhere, whether it's global or CTV, CBC. And I think news is following right now. It's sad. I have no answers for it. Like I said, Chris, just a sad day, though. Yeah. Good luck to you guys. I don't wish that on anyone. I told Althea in 2015 I didn't want the tap on the back. So I progressively looked for another career. I was lucky enough to find it here. But it was my wish I didn't get the tap on the back. Because you want to leave with dignity, you want to leave with pride. I've seen more people leave stations in handcuffs than you ever want to see. Great people that were mentors of mine and other people, but when the day comes when management decides there has to be a cut, those are the people that are escorted out first, and I have that vividly in my mind.
Do you have any opinion on the reduction that's about to be announced today?
It's more than sad. It's a catastrophe for those workers, but also I will say for the civic discussion in our society and the future of democracy. We need strong media and reporters like you and others to to be the counter power for the government and MPs and ask us tough questions based on fact and science. without reporters in the newsroom. That's really problematic. And it's more cuts in the media world in general, after TVA, after post-media, after a lot. Do you believe any of that?
I'm just wondering, because the cuts may not be in newsrooms, they may be in entertainment, they may be in sports, they may be in other things. So the CBC Radio Canada mandate is very broad.
Yes.
And is it too broad? Should it be narrowed a bit to allow?
No, I like the mandate of our public broadcaster. This Radio-Canada CBC is doing things that, private sector will never do. So I think it's good to have those public investments in there. But I'm afraid that might have some impact on newsroom and Radio-Canada CBC. And in some region, if you don't have RDI or local CBC, you have nothing else. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Oliphant, what do you think of the giant protest numbers that are just out there on the lawn? Is that part of the whole discussion that's happening in Canada right now? Or?
Sure. I don't see them as protesters. I see them as people with an important message, and we're hearing it. And as I hear every message, but I don't consider that a protest. I consider it actual civic action, and it's an important part of the process.
And given that you're Don Valley West, I expect a fair amount of those people are your constituents, right?
I have a very diverse riding. I've got a large population that are Jewish, large population that are Muslim, and everyone else as well. So I listen to all of them.
Thank you, Mrs. Zaid, could I ask you, large protest out there, what do you think?
Everyone has a right to protest. Peaceful protest should be good.
There have been a lot of protests on the pro-Palestinian side on Saturdays. Do you think moving the protest to a weekday would be more successful gathering numbers or not?
I think it's up to them, who are organizing based on people's availability. More people are free. Peaceful protests are important, and for the pro-Palestinian, I think it's important that we continue to make sure that Canada stands for ceasefire, because after a truce, it was really sad to see the bombardment again as of Friday. So many innocent civilians have been killed since Friday, and it's horrifying to see all those pictures which are coming from Palestine.
Thank you for stopping.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for listening today, and I just want to leave it with this particular thought that, hey, we all want a safe and affordable home. We want to be able to live and not worry about how we're going to pay our bills, and it's something that we need to get our government and our elected officials knowing that, hey, that's how we feel about things. So send the letters when the vote comes up. Make sure you're in there to cast that vote and send a message to our government what it is that we want in our general society for us to live and live well. Thanks again for listening. Find that subscribe button wherever it is that it may be, and we will talk to everybody later. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.